Hello, everybody. This is the second edition of Care to Share through Disability Cornwall. I'm delighted to have as my guest this morning Robert Rush, who's the Managing Director of PFA Research here in Cornwall. How you doing, Robert?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Um, can we just start kind of with a almost like a non-caring question? Just tell us a little bit about what you do and about PFA research.
Okay, so PFA Research is it's what our industry calls a full service market research agency. So we collect data and insights and hopefully deliver that back in some sort of form of intelligence to our clients that helps them make better business decisions, policy making decisions, help inform their marketing strategy. So it's all about that evidence approach to running a business and reducing risk from what people do. So we provide and bring a toolbox of people and methodologies that allow us to collect data and deliver that back as insights.
So it's sort of quite close intellectual work. It's something which demands a lot of sort of mental energy, I guess.
Well, I think running a small business does do that, and you know, we talk about, what is it we do, what's our product. The vast majority of the time, you are trying to run a business. You're trying to deal with staff issues. You're looking at finance. You're looking at planning. You're trying to work and schedule things, and it's all that. That's no different in us than everybody else. But yes, our clients demand, exactly what you just said. That's what our clients demand of us. That's the bit they want to see, and what that needs. So, um, moving out of one space and out of a very functional space and into that way to deliver, yes, that highly intellectual delivery of work is, um, I guess that's the challenge.
And I guess what's interesting as well, if you think that, I don't know, 50,000 people in Cornwall are probably self-employed, and you've got possibly twice that number again who are running small businesses. Um, you know, uh, and we've got 30,000 carers. There must be some overlap between that. So there's probably people running around keeping the Cornish economy going, but also doing a lot of hard work in effect for the NHS.
Well, it's a really good point, isn't it? So, okay, we've got people in Cornwall, but I've got people outside of Cornwall as well, and in our, our group of say 30 people, the type of issues that come up in just that small group of people amongst our staff, they're carers, they experience trauma, they have issues of, I don't know, with their children, with their pets, with the issue of just trying to get to work, of juggling the bills, and all these life issues, because that's what we're talking about, these things that we all go through at some point. But I sometimes look at our relatively small group and say, and we try to support them as a company, and we've got policies in place, and try to work with that, and open and recognize that people have, they come to us for a few hours a day, but actually most of the time they're not with us. And all those sorts of issues that come up. And I think, crikey, if that's just amongst that small group of people that
Mm,
we know and have a
mm.
relationship, and hearing their stories sometimes of what they're dealing with, and dealing with authorities or dealing with the NHS, or crikey, that's huge. So yeah, project that out.
Mm.
So it's not 30, it's not 300, it's not 3,000, 300,000. Multiply that by, 1,000 times, you start to think, well, what a huge amount of work that people are doing, and you know, that's life, I suppose. When it comes
Yeah,
down to it,
well, I
that,
was just wondering, do you think
that's life.
the type of work that PFA does or offers, do you think it attracts people who um do have caring responsibilities, because there's a certain amount of flexibility around it. It's not like you're
Mm,
going down South Crofty for 8 hours a
yeah.
day and you can't come up. It's a different kind of work.
Yes, to a point, and so any sort of like service marketing type B2B agency type um, organization like us, you tend to have this. We have this nucleus of a small group of employees at the center. All right, and I'm one of those. My company employs me. That our full-time jobs are there to run and make everything happen. And then we got this, this group of in our case, we call them field workers, they're researchers, data collectors that vary. And we've been agonizing really over a few years because we use 0 hour contracts. We use them. We are not using exploitative 0 hour contracts, but we use them because that's the way that we can give a contract to people and say, here are the hours. This is what you're entitled to. You get your holiday, and you are part of the family, and you get all this support package that we provide as a company with you. The thing we agonize with is that those hours vary. So we might be able to say, yeah, we know for the next month we're going to need you as many hours as you're able to provide. Can't guarantee beyond that. So we've been agonizing with these contracts for years and saying, can we do something better? Can we provide a better? So I currently welcome the current review by the current government looking at them, as perverse as that sounds. I haven't got a better solution for it, and I don't think it's significantly going to change if we can get used. But if we can get used to rid of the exploitative ones, then that's great. We've gone to staff in the past and said, and offered them and said, actually, you're doing a job. Could we, we'd like to make your contract more rigid. And they said, oh, no, I quite like it actually, because I want to go to Spain for a month in August. Or no, it works around. I like that. I like being in control, that I can say, no, I choose not to work next week. And we've got
Yeah,
a number of people do that.
yeah,
Now, yes, we have a number of people on our staff that are carers for people, and it works around. And they're carers because they are, in some cases, it's elderly parents that they say, I need to kind of be there. I need to be able to go around to my mother's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to prepare meals and so on. So I can't do beyond, 4. And I might be a bit late sometimes in the morning because I have to go and deal with the breakfast and getting up and that sort of thing. And we got staff who have young families. So we got a couple of remote staff that they wouldn't be they probably wouldn't be working. They are, I think, by their own admission, are in positions there where in some cases they don't have to work. There is already a steady salary from a partner coming into the household. But
yeah.
we all know that that can be
It,
a fragile scenario.
it can, and it
So
kind of raises a point as well, I think, about carers allowance. I mean, you're not going to know who's getting that and who isn't, but you can only get the carers allowance if you're working less than a particular number of hours a week.
mm,
I think they can
mm,
average it out over the month, or a year, but it becomes very difficult for an individual with caring responsibilities to
yeah,
be able to work without compromising that allowance. which
Yeah.
doesn't come to more than I think £74 a week.
Right. Okay.
And if you work too many hours, you're not entitled to that allowance. I think you have to care for, and I ought to check this for the podcast, and I will in the future. I think you've got to care for someone pretty certain 35 hours a week. But
Okay. Mm,
theoretically, you could do that 35 hours and work as well, because that
mm,
could be domestic duties of an evening and at the weekend, and then that would
mm.
make up the 35 hours.
Yeah.
So it does. Can you tell me a bit about your particular role as a carer?
Yeah, look, in one sense, I feel a bit of a fraud because it's not a huge imposition on my life. I mean, don't get me wrong, but yeah. So elderly parent, my mother, recently had um, um, developed an illness that took away a lot of her independence. I'm gonna be a little bit guarded because she does, she's not
Of
here to speak
course.
for herself, and um, but so I'll speak in very general terms because
Yeah.
I suspect what I'm present is no different from lots and lots of other people. But she's widowed because I lost my dad about 5 years ago. Um, and actually, even my dad's sort of, you know, last few years, my mum was his carer, but when he became ill, that put further demand on the family around. And I'm lucky because I've got my sister nearby as well, but who is also in a quite a high pressure job that takes her away. Um, so yeah, so now my mother um has been ill, and I hopefully now we kind of got to a bit of stability because we've got support in, and as a result of her becoming ill, has there's things get donated, are loaned, I guess, from the loan store,
Yeah.
sort of like a walking frame and a wheelchair and all those sorts of things. And um but so anyway, so that's the background to it. Role as a carer. um I think you talked earlier about that that challenge for that, being able to deliver an an intellectual knowledge type product and service, and which can be exhausting. You can be sat at this in front of this computer for hours a day. You're challenging what you have to do, and then you break away and have to go and prepare a meal. Well, that's okay. That's quite that can be that's a release from my point of view,
Yeah.
but it means actually that's got to happen at that time. There is someone else that actually has those things are just far more important. My
Yeah.
mother's needs and my family's needs at that time, they just trump everything, don't they?
Yeah.
That's the point.
I mean,
And so
that's
when
that
those
that
things
is
happen,
interesting. Interesting
when
perspective.
yeah, when those things happen, and it's relatively stable at the minute. I have to say it's not a huge imposition at the moment, but for 3 or 4 months, um, I was sort of tag teaming with my sister as, okay, well, I'm going to be around then. Are you? I no, I can't be there. I've got to be away in St. Austell for a meeting. So, okay, I can move that in my diary around. So you start and you suddenly think, well, those networking meetings, well, that's okay. No one's going to miss me if I'm not there.
Yeah.
So that cancels. Can I do that now? Well, I'll have to do that. Well, it's okay. It doesn't have to be done between the hours of 9 and 5. I could do that this evening. I can come back to that. What you don't realize is that, and in my in the later age of 50s, you haven't got that energy that you had when you were in your 30s, and
Tell
you
me
sort of
about it.
look back at 7 o'clock in the evening. I just want to go to bed.
Yeah.
No, I don't, and that's why I say I feel a bit of a fraud. I mean, that's just realism. That's just life. That's just how it is. We all I get a bit tired.
But I think that's an interesting perspective on it, because what you've hit on there is the fact that there are many people probably who are carers, but they don't realize it. So if you quote that figure, from the census of about 30,000 carers in Cornwall, that may well be the tip of the iceberg, because people don't necessarily define themselves in that way. I mean, if you're um, apart from obvious love for your family and care and support, if somebody feels duty bound that they've got to go and see their 80-year-old mum or dad every Sunday without
Mm.
fail to check in on them rather than just phone them up, that's a caring role. And I think it's really important personally that hopefully through these podcasts people realize and watch these podcasts and understand that caring really, really extends to our society, and our society would probably collapse without it, especially as people are living longer and hitting disabilities which are being cared for by the NHS, which perhaps 50 years ago the NHS would not be able to manage or wouldn't be able to necessarily get its head around. So yeah, I think fraud's the wrong word, because you're doing a
Well,
fantastic job. You're doing what you're meant to do, I guess, for want of a better
yeah,
word.
that's it. And I think that's it really. I sort of hear myself sort of saying this and thinking, oh, yeah, but it's not about you, Robert, is it? As someone with a great, but we're here talking because let's talk about let's put a name to this of you're a carer and talk about it from your perspective. So that's what I'm doing. Actually, that's just what you do for family. That's
Yeah,
just what you do. It's
yeah,
I don't particularly see it as caring. There are not caring, but I see it as a role. I see it as, well, that's just something you do, and let's talk about what that is as an opportunity to talk about what that means in a place like Cornwall that has high levels of deprivation and therefore an aging population and therefore a need on that workforce that we are trying to get upskilled and more productive. But there is this thing going on behind, there is this wave going on behind it that says there is lots and lots and lots of people. I don't know if it's most, but you might probably get into the figures, have some kind of other pull on them other than having to go to work and earn a living to pay for all those things. So,
yeah.
and that's what it's like.
And of course, families are very different these days, because you'll have
Well,
you'll have both partners working because they have to be able to make ends meet. So you haven't got someone who's, again, for want of a better word, spare, who can take over those caring duties and do that
no,
full time and take the weight off the other person.
no, and I think that's the case here with us. Now we're really lucky, right? My my nearest neighbour up to about 4 or 5 years ago was my mum and dad. My nearest neighbour now is my sister because she's built a house that is just next door. So we're close together. We're geographically close together, So we literally could just pop out the door, run down the drive, and pop in and take a meal in, mum. And we kind of do that Friday evening meals
I I
over there.
I do rather worry as well. I mean, you and I are a similar vintage, and if you're um Generation X, who were born between 1964 and 1980, we were also There was a couple of sort of baby booms in there. I think the 60s ones was bigger, and then there was another one in the 70s.
Mhm.
Um, Someone's going to have to look after us one day.
Yeah.
And I know, one of the impacts of Brexit has been that those people from Europe who were domestic carers or carers in hospitals or whatever have gone. And there's a lot of Nigerian and Zimbabwean carers around, both in the hospital setting and the home setting. And you think, well, what's going to happen in the future if
Mm.
we get to 80 or 90 and we need that support? And it's something which well, I don't know, it's something perhaps you don't want to think about too many
No,
decades ahead.
because we think, well, yeah, I'm going to be fit and I'm
Yeah.
able, and you don't see yourself, and but yeah, you don't see yourself ending up in those positions. But of course, it's inevitable.
You
Um,
mentioned meal preparation. I mean, are you a good cook? Is that something that you enjoy, or
yeah, as it happens, I do, and but it's a different, isn't it? Yeah, I like preparing food. I'm quite adventurous. I'm quite innovative. I can make a meal out of next to nothing, so I've always in our household been the cook. So that's always been a role. So that's fine. And it's fine when I can almost do it on my terms at my timings.
yeah,
Now there's a difference because suddenly we're thinking, oh, okay, actually, so we're going to prepare that. Yeah, that that pack of six sausages we were going to open. That actually is that enough? Because we need to add them. We need to make sure we got a meal for mum as well. We'll do that, and then again. I'm tag teaming with my sister. She said, she'll send me a WhatsApp. Mum's got tea tonight, or I'm doing roast chicken tonight. We'll drop one down to mum. I'm thinking, oh, that's great because we're not going to get around to cooking anything before 7 o'clock tonight. By the time we drop something down at 8, that's going to be too late for it. Right, I better go down and just check. And if she hasn't got a meal, I haven't heard anything. I better run down. So it's not probably a bad thing. I'm making sure to finish up work a little bit earlier because I'm thinking I better pop down and see my mum
yeah.
and see if she wants make an omelette or something. So she's got something at a timely
But again, it's
time.
another good point because I think if you're a carer, you're caring for family and friends,
Mm,
and you have to cook for them. If you are a half decent cook, that helps everybody. I mean, and I think it's one of the skills perhaps that you might learn.
mm.
Um, because clearly, if you can't cook, or you don't enjoy it, it's going to cause problems for everybody, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Well,
Um,
at the moment I've got my youngest daughter home as well. So she finished university and now she's doing something else. So she's home for at least a year. Um, and kind of I don't know about the deal, but one of those informal conversations we had is, well, it'd be really helpful, if you could help it, you do some of the cooking. And she's sort of taken it upon herself to organise and lead on the evening meals, and it's
oh,
and it's
fantastic.
great. So I was away yesterday and down the office at Tremo and didn't go home till late-ish, and she'd made a chili con carne and some soda bread or something and
See,
opening a
that's
portion.
she's become a carer for you.
Yes, yes, in that respect. And I've taken some down for my mum and
Chili's a good one though, because it's you can bamboozle people with it, that it's a really
oh
it's a complex, tasty meal, but actually it's quite
yeah,
simple to make.
yeah. I'll don't give away all the secrets. Yeah, no, no, you're right. She did it in a slow cooker or something. I think
Yeah,
she hadn't used the slow cooker before, so she was quite intrigued to try and do that. That was probably what the great. But it all helps, and I did say to him, I said, do you know, it's just really nice to be cooked for. No, and it's rare. I'm usually the cook, but it's really nice to have someone cook for you. And I don't mean just make a sandwich. I mean someone that prepares a meal for you. And that was really nice. So, sorry, that's a complete aside, but I did say thank you. It was really helpful, and I found it a great help as opposed to sort of getting home at 7 and then thinking, "Has Mum had anything today?"
I wanted to move on actually, just talk about whether you've had any experience of agencies of the NHS and Cornwall Council in terms of caring. I mean, you mentioned the Lone Store, for example, which is really good. I think we've got in Cornwall, we've got a very good service that helps people with adaptations and loans
Mm,
to support them in their own homes.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about it, but other than, you know, various bits of equipment have turned up, and um,
You don't know how you how you came
well,
by
to a
them.
point. So it's um, so when my mum was in hospital, so she spent a month in hospital, but on about 4 or 5 different wards, moved from one place to another, and um, and I think in sort of the last one she was on, it became very clear. Say clear to me, but I started to. You certainly got the impression that as soon as um, a treatment or assessment had been delivered, there was a sense of now we need to discharge this patient. You certainly got the impression, we know there's bed shortage. We know we can see the ambulances queuing up to get people into the system and through. It's obvious and it's fun. So I make no criticism of those working in the NHS and in our hospitals that are doing their absolute best to deliver the best I guess medical treatments that they can. Trying to use that, I'll say care. Care is a very easy word that we throw around, but there was you certainly got the impression that it was about, right, we've done that, there's nothing more we can do, you need to be somewhere else. And in the last place my mum was at, I remember getting a call actually from the doctor who said, right, your mum, there's, I'm paraphrasing, but there's nothing more we can do for her here. She needs to go. The issue is with confidence. It's confidence to be able to get up and walk. She can do it, but there's a nervousness. And so she was trying to address the barriers, I think, with my mum. Well, what's going to stop me? My mum said, well, I'm going to need a wheelchair. You know, how am I going to get about? Okay, so I've ordered a wheelchair. Well, she can walk with a frame, so I've ordered a walking frame, a Zimmer frame. Going to need a commode or whatever it might be. So I've ordered one of those. This was the doctor. So I've got this all ordered. So what are the barriers to going home? Kind of thing. So, and suddenly this stuff started turning up. My mum was still in hospital. And actually then she got moved to a home from home service, a place at Penhallow, which is kind of not a care home. It's an NHS supported thing. It's clear it's run by Chaos, one of the care companies. But for people who need to kind of rehabilitate, and the idea is they're there for 4 weeks, and it supposedly allows them to start. They're supposed to be able to do their own, start to cook and do their washing, but in a cared for, supported environment. I'm going to be really careful what I say. The staff there were lovely. but it wasn't delivering. It wasn't doing that in my mind. So she was there for a bit until one day she said, "Oh, you're going home tomorrow." Okay. And we got
No
a call.
warning.
No warning. And we'd had, you know, we've had various conversations with various people say, look, you know, what we read, look, it's fine, but just make sure you're not going to call us up one day and say she's going to be home tonight or in the morning. You know, we need to make sure. And it kind of is what was going to happen. As it happened, it didn't quite happen like that because we objected. Said, hang on, what, you know, we need to have something in place here. And so then you put in the steps package gets
Yeah.
arranged. Yeah, that's supposed to be for up to 6 weeks. You're told it's 6 weeks, but it's up to 6 weeks. While other stuff gets sorted out, so it's more permanent. You say, okay. But you know, and then when she does arrive, so then it's, you know, it's one of the transporting ambulances that come and arrive and bring her home, and everything and gets, you know, I guess wheeled in to a home. Luckily, we got adaptations in the home from when my dad was ill. So there's a ramp at the front. There's a wet room already in. It was designed for my dad, who was a fairly big bloke, but you know, so
Lifetime homes, Robert.
eh,
Lifetime homes.
yeah, yeah. Well, it was designed for. It was put in place when my dad needed care packages in place. So
Yeah.
in that respect, we're kind of lucky in that some of those adaptations are already there in the home. So that's fine. But she gets wheeled in, all the stuff that comes with her, dropped on the kitchen floor, said, yeah, there we go. Thank you very much. Bye. Okay. Now, as it happened, it was on a weekend. And I was around. And then my sister was around as well for a bit when she came back. So that was fine. But I remember thinking at the time, what if we weren't? What if this was for somebody who lived completely on their own with no support network around?
Yeah.
What would what would they do?
Was there any equipment that you felt you needed to be shown how to use that had just been sort of dumped and you didn't have a clue you
No,
could use?
well, not really. And I don't think that, you know, sorry, the question started off about equipment, didn't it? And I've gone off on a
Well,
complete
it was about also,
sidetrack. But
how the how the council and NHS might work together. Because, for example, they've both got occupational therapists. Um, and the council does some things, the NHS does other things. How they work together, I think, is quite interesting and might be an interesting thing to explore in one of these podcasts in the future. Um, but also, you've got the wider issue now. I was reading this morning, Jane Kirkham, who's the MP for
mm,
Truro and Falmouth. She was attending an event yesterday in the House of Commons where it was a debate, and it was about how to get people out of hospital more swiftly.
mm,
Because I think at one point, certainly my experience a few years ago, there were three. They called them lounges at Trelisk, almost like departure lounges, and they were
mm,
full of quite elderly people who
yeah,
needed a lot of support. And it was about how you get those people out so you free up space in the NHS. But how that's done, the coordination of that and how equipment's provided, etc. There's a kind of a quite a logistical task linked to all of that.
yeah. Well, let's leave a logistical task to those who can deal with logistics. But let's what I would say, my experience and thought and reflections and my imagination of all that is, let's just think about, there is perhaps an elderly, frail person who is still not well. at that point. They might be going home, but they're not necessarily well, and they're going to need a lot of care. What we've got is a system where the care is packaged and is designed to slot in after it all. It needs to start way before they get into that lounge. The care needs to start. They need to think there is a person there with feel, and it's not. And there is a person, and there is often, but not always. But you've got to at least ask the question. There is a family around and people who want to help, who are stakeholders, but they are stakeholders in that person's wellness and recovery. And if it's recovery, or maybe it's not recovery, maybe it's helping them have dignified time after that moment, that want to help and want to be part of it and need knowledge. And when it comes down to it, it's a communication. There is a, and it's not completely devoid. And I'm sure, if anybody wants to listen or watch this, they will say, well, that's not my experience. Absolutely, that's the case.
Yeah,
We know that's the case.
yeah,
The fact
the point of these, though, Robert, these podcasts is that everybody will have different experiences, and I'm
course,
hoping one of the things that comes out of them might be some golden threads that can help
yeah.
inform.
But in my experience, someone has sometimes forgotten that, in this case, my mum is a real person with family around that want to help, and the communication, it's the joins, the nodes between these systems that are not interlocked. They might connect, but they're not woven together. They're not really joined up and talking and understood with the person and the family at the center of it. Now, I'm sure there are lots of people that work in the services that are going to say, that's just simply not true, Robert. That's not how we do it. My experience from outside looking in is it's absolutely true.
Perhaps
So,
the agencies need to have more feedback, when people have settled back into their homes, and perhaps left the NHS setting, or they've had their initial council support. There needs to be kind of, because I know care agencies do it, that they ask clients regularly, how do you feel? There's questionnaires, the sort of thing that
yeah,
you and I are
yeah.
familiar with. But I don't think it's done in terms of what we're talking about. How did it go? There's no learning for the professionals, really.
That's, yeah. Look, my mum's now got a care agency in as a care package. We've recently just gone through the financial assessment, and okay, she's probably going to have to pay for some of that now. It's fine, and they're brilliant. This is Bluebird Care North
Oh
in
yeah,
North Cornwall,
yeah. They got
and
a big branch in Truro as well, I think.
yeah, so it's a franchise model, but that locally they're very local businesses, and they're brilliant from what I can see in care, and they are, yeah, and um, so that sort of feedback, that once that is in place. Now, my mum's really happy with them. They come in once a day in the morning, and that helps her to get up as she needs to, or helps her to shower or whatever, and those things can help get her breakfast and that sort of thing. Do what she needs to do. Just have her perhaps put the broom round, or hoover, or take the bins out, whatever is on my mum's mind to help with those things. So it's that help and support with the living. Brilliant.
Yeah,
That's great.
fantastic.
Now that's
Yeah,
in place.
yeah,
And that's a great, so we know that one of those times at risk in the morning, she's supported. That was great. Actually, the join up and getting them in place after the steps finished, that was all managed pretty well. There's been no particular, I know there have been people, and the calls I took at the time when they said, right, the steps are going to finish. And yes, there is this assessment. You've assessed that she needs ongoing care, because steps talk about it being care, but it's not really care. It's about rehabilitation. It's about a readjustment into the home. Lots of the stories aren't told that way, so it's described different ways to you as you go through it, but you learn. It's fine. That handover between there and Bluebird, actually, that worked really well as well. You knew it was going to happen, and it started to put in place. The in-home assessment, the agencies, and I thought I forget the role, but the person that come out and did the needs assessment.
Is that an occupational therapist kind of? I think OTs they call them.
Yeah, it probably is, but it was, and she came out and we had a nice meeting with her, and she took Mum's complete story. Really interesting. It was very personal. That's brilliant. I have to say, and the needs, because that triggered things. She said, okay, we're going to need this. You're going to need the key safe on. You're going to need assessed. Okay, we've got wraps here. I'm going to have a look around. What do you need? So that's all been brilliant. It is what feels clunky are those joins between, I guess, actually there's clunkiness and joins within the hospital, the NHS itself. Don't fault the care, the expertise. Brilliant. The communications and the continuity and the connection with the family and the support, and there's some real there are issues there. They're all resolvable, I think. But
yeah, that's interesting.
But it is that.
Yeah. Do you have, and I don't expect you to answer this in full, but do you have any kind of solutions, any solvability, anything you've observed which you think, well, that could help with that if they tried this?
Do you know, there's something around workflow, it's that, what do we
Gantt charts.
my mum should have had a scan when she was in. We were told, she said, this is what's going to happen when she's on 1 This is what she needs. Okay, we've done this. She had this treatment. Now we're going to have to, and she will need to have a scan so we can see the impact of it. And then she got moved ward, and that didn't go through. But we assumed that was still in process. So it kind of, there were things that got missed because of transfer and because of one ward. And this patient's been here for 4 days now.
So you're not you're
Pressure on the bed.
Are you saying you weren't kept informed of
No, it's not
things?
about not being kept informed. There were times where we thought, actually, what is going on? And you couldn't find and there wasn't a duty doctor around at the time, or you said, oh yes, they will be in, your phone and said, oh yeah, they'll be in tomorrow. So it was, okay, we'll arrange for that trip down to hospital tomorrow. And then the doctor wasn't there. And they'd gone home, and he said, okay, we can get them to call you. So it was just a bit, I guess, a pressured environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not criticizing, you don't want to come across as NHS bashing, because it's that one for this. You just look at it and think, some of these things just don't have to be that way. And it's down to workflow and communications and just things not flowing through. How can things get missed because a patient moves from one place to another place? And she went out to she was in the local community hospital at one point, a part of that, which was wonderful. It was quite nearby. And then temperature spiked. So they thought, we can't take a risk. Off she goes back down. And so things that were going to be planned for her, apparently, got missed. And you sort of think, how can that how can that happen? What are the, is it the notes that are just slow to follow? Is there, it's really hard to put some of this in this a mum's particular story. It was just so kind of fast moving in a way that you are therefore, as a supporting family, trying to keep up with making sure the right clothes get changed and come home and get washed and go in what she need, and making sure she's got some that, you know, support from family and visitors and that sort of thing to, you know, and also, and then to find out, you know, the basically the underlying illness. Well, some of these things take time, so you don't, you know, you don't press on it. So it's really hard to keep up, especially when you're also trying to run a business and run a family, and back to what we were talking about earlier and those things. So you deal with the stuff you have to deal with.
It sounds, Robert, from what you're saying as well, that's actually quite a stressful situation for everybody, for the family. And I just wonder, as a, you know, and I don't want to put words into your mouth. I mean, you might not have found it stressful, but if you did find it stressful, how did you manage that stress? Did you have any sort of strategies or tips that you could give people who might be watching this?
Oh, um, I don't know if I do, you know, like I said, I always go for a run. I'm not a runner, you know. I don't go to the gym. I play badminton once a week, and I try to preserve that. Actually, I stopped doing that for you know, I in the last, apart from, you know, a period of time through COVID, you know, I barely missed a Thursday evening in about 8 years, because that was the one, you know, that was my time to go out and have a game of badminton. Um, and I didn't do that for a few weeks because I just couldn't. And actually, for the first time, occasionally you just get back and say, oh, just, you know, either I was visiting my mum somewhere, or I got to the point that I just want to sit and watch telly, you know. And so you do make changes, and you do sort of, I guess, potentially retract a bit. But I don't think lots of us are very good at knowing if we are stressed, until somebody tells you. You know, you can feel stress, and I do. You know, I feel fuse is getting a bit shorter, so I
Yeah.
feel like I think I'm reasonably good at tempering how I deal with other people in those. You know, I am aware. Yeah,
But stress is quite,
stress
can
is,
be an individual thing. I mean, it affects people
yeah,
in different ways, doesn't it? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
you know, it could be anything from anger to tears to suddenly working a lot harder, becoming a workaholic. You know, and
yeah.
it's I mean, that's a question that I kind of like to ask everybody in these podcasts, because I think I'm going to get a different response from everybody, really. Um,
Mm,
is there any sort of practical advice that you could give someone who is just, you know, on the edge of being a carer? I mean, and that probably that probably applies to a lot of people. I mean, um if you've got parents who are kind of, you know, they might be bouncing about like Mick Jagger, but in 5 years' time they might not be.
no.
So I suppose if you're looking at your parents, you always view your parents as kind of the same as they were when you were a kid. You think
Mm,
they're made of Teflon.
mm.
Um, so that might be a kind of a hurdle to get over.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've had different instances. You know, I've largely been talking about what's kind of, you know, what's in our life now, but
Yeah,
it's a few years ago where there was a different sort of caring needed. And certainly I was, look, I'm very fortunate in that, you know, you know, one or two of the people in my company and how we work. So, um, you know, I've kind of built right as far as work goes. My colleague Beata always says, no one ever said in their life, I wish I'd worked hard. I wish I'd worked more instead of spending more time with family, and that sort of thing. But we have, if you make those changes and say, okay, I'm this, I just have to give my priority today to something's happened. I need to go and deal with this. The rest does it. You make the rest of it happen. The rest of it just happens.
Yeah.
I no, this isn't good tips, is it? This is just me reflecting and saying, oh,
Well, perhaps the
you'll be
tip
fine.
is,
It will work out.
yeah, perhaps the tip is try and keep calm.
Yeah,
And
I know
and
what it
and
is.
and actually, you make a good point as a small business person, which I think is important to communicate to the business community, that people who work, everybody is human, and it doesn't matter whether you're, whatever your job is, everybody will have challenges outside of work, which will affect their performance in work. That's just a
Mm,
fact of life.
yeah.
So there needs to be a greater understanding of that, and how people, how, what people have got going on in their private life needs to be supported so you can get the best out of them in their professional life.
Yes, yes, I think there is greater understanding now, generally, of people's home lives. I think COVID did something there, and
Mhm.
I hope it stays. When we all went to this Zooms
Mhm.
and everything happened there, we suddenly started to see that little insight into people's lives. We realized that actually they were at home, there were kids running around, there were pets, there were elderly family, they had needs. We suddenly became, as if we couldn't already, but become aware of it and accepting of it. And I think, you know, I don't, you and I haven't got shirt and ties on today, and it's
I've not
okay.
worn a tie. I've not worn a tie in 4.5 years, and I never will
I do
again.
want to say, but but you see what I mean? We just suddenly realize actually there are people here. We're dealing with people. And if something's come out of like, the COVID thing and all this is, I think hopefully there is a greater awareness of that people have family and lives and needs and caring and all those things to do, that those things are important. And I I don't know. Maybe it's just a bit of a bubble we live in, but we've tried to build that into our business that says, "Ah, we do accept this." I mean, we embraced a flexible working thing donkeys years ago and said,
Yeah, yeah.
life around work, work around life. You know, you don't need. It's not about work-life balance, life-life balance. It's okay. You need to go out. Yeah, you need to go down and make your mum a cup of tea at 11 o'clock. That's fine. Right, do that. It's about what you do, your outputs that matter, and so as a culture and as an ethos, we've embraced that. So that's been a great help because I know I've got a team around me that understand that, and I think all of us in my team have had something to deal with over the last 5 years. All my key, yeah, my all my key team, without have had something about the sorts of things we've been talking about today to deal with. And you may, and it's okay. And there's no
That's
tips, there is it? It's just reflecting, but it's just
that's a great place to stop, Robert. I want to thank you for being candid and mixing your personal experience and your professional experience and your observations. So I think this has been a great podcast. It ought to be of interest and help to a lot of people. So thank you very much for your time today.
Pleasure to speak with you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.